when you showed me this, I was thinking, all right. And then on the right, there's another one. Is this a giant burial ground for? Because think about it. If I can, I'll send you a quick something to share, but it shows how the Earth pivots between glacial pole shifts and this sort of thing.
All right. Welcome to a bonus civilization cycle. I thought we would talk about these artifacts that are in South America. Are they, is Google messing with this? Is there actually, something other than a digital artifact that exists? But I came across this imagery on Twitter and I thought, no way. I always see these things. I go check them out myself. They always turn out to be bunk, bogus. But this time, to my surprise, I zoomed in and there they were. So are they real? Are they a digital artifact? Which I doubt. I mean, they're just too symmetrical, but it could be, Google really messing with us. And you got to wonder how many other Easter eggs are kind of out there. And David Dubine agreed to pop on and join me and to talk about the strange things out there.
Thank you for having me. Yes, and indeed, they keep trying to push this Comet Atlas, 3I Atlas, third interstellar visitor of the Comet Atlas. So you have to wonder, before when we had the live show, we were trying to think about, are they trying to gaslight and get everybody ready for some sort of alien, I wouldn't say invasion, but interaction? So to release this and then show this in the ice, are these the giants of old that are coming? I mean, think about if you really wanted to blend biblical mythology with some sort of Sumerian tales back in Babylonia with the Sumerian texts that have been translated from Sitchin and bring it all into like one neatly wrapped package for today's social media consumption. Would this not be just like the perfect? We got the images, we got the sizes, we can figure out how big they are, or they match with, the number of cubits and whatever that they were in the biblical era. So everything matches. It's nice. It's succinct. And now where do we go from here?
Right. I'm used to looking all over these Google Maps on Google Earth to find stuff like, all kinds of neat archaeological sites out there that nobody's doing anything with. And you can actually find that all over Google Earth. But to come across something like this, and so this is just kind of really out there.
Yeah, dive in there for a second. I when you showed me this, I was thinking, all right. And then on the right, there's another one. Is this a giant burial ground for? Because think about it. If I can, I'll send you a quick something to share, but it shows how the Earth pivots between glacial pole shifts and this sort of thing. Antarctica is right near the equator, and brings it up to like 20 north, 25 north. So if you think as the pole had shifted, that is what is barren ice now would be on the equatorial bands. So
This is just wild. I mean, I immediately, don't want to believe that this is a real landscape because what that would mean actually is, mind blowing that if this was actually a real artifact, because you can see I've made a lot of images like this myself. It's kind of, I've termed it forced pareidolia.
a 2025 survey found that over half of U.S. adults are concerned about how fast their skin is aging, and 40% fixate on random wrinkles or dark spots. If that sounds like you, you're not alone. More and more people are noticing visible changes in their skin earlier than expected. This is why I use the anti-aging collagen secret weapon. It provides my skin with 5 must-have types of collagen needed to reduce wrinkles. And since taking it, I've experienced smoother skin and more elasticity. Plus, it mixes smoothly with my morning coffee or tea. No taste, no clumps. Be sure to grab a bag of ageless multi-collagen now that it's 51% off only at healthwithadapt2030.com and help take years off the clock. Plus, by ordering now, you're also guaranteed to get the free ebook titled The 14 Foods for Amazing Skin, a 60-day satisfaction guarantee and free shipping. Once again, that's healthwithadapt2030.com. Click on that link in the description box below.
Right? where you take an image and you blend it together. But see, they're all over this little area here. There's a giant skull. I mean, and if you zoom in, it's like a fractal. There's more and more of
Is that
this
the
mirrored
large nose
stuff.
with 2 eyes, or is that the fractal between in the eye, with the center of the eyes there or something? I do a
Right.
lot of reverse imagery on, Egyptian hieroglyphs as well because you can see, what looks like plasma devices for me. I'll do the same thing. I'll butterfly them, and then I'll invert them mirrored, and then you start to come up with what looks like technological devices.
Right.
Is it
I
just
mean,
me seeing that, or is that truly there? Is that the way they hid the information?
well, either way, if somebody created this digital image and then overlaid it the telemetry of this, glacier right here, because that's what it is. It's on an island that actually looks like, it kind of looks like a face too, the whole island. But when you zoom in on it, it is definitely mirrored imagery. This one looks like a mantis being over here, but then if you just change the
And as you
perspective,
go up, just more faces, but there's another one, and there's below that, there's like 6 or 7, 8, 9 in a row right there.
right. And then even if you zoom in closer, it becomes more faces. Like that looks like a guy with
That looks
pointy ears.
very Mayan hieroglyphic,
Right.
or you could say Khmer as well, Khmer style, and
And
Angkor Wat.
I actually found it all the way down to here. And it's this forced pareidolia. I really think that something interesting might be here, but why they put this digital, I mean, because that's wild. Because this isn't like a hoax like usually where you go look. Because watch, I'll just back out of it. This is Google Earth I'm looking at live. You zoom out. That's at the bottom of South America, and then I copied and pasted these and just put it right in there, and it went boom. It went right to that thing. So this is a real
Interesting to see
thing,
if they erase this out in the next few days or weeks to see when you like what we're doing right now, if that gets erased out eventually.
right? Well, this is wild. Any explanation for it that there's something here that actually looks like this, which to me is kind of doubtful because I can see the image kind of going down the cliff here. The mirror image completes like this devil's ear is on this side. And look at this, it's just wild. I mean, look at the definition of the images they made.
But then the fractals within the fractals too, because when you look, okay, you're looking at a larger face, but if you zoomed in, I'm sure you'd see a smaller face within, like say, the center of the eyes, the tip of the
Yeah.
nose, or something that was seen further up in that. So, again, the iconography that's presented here is this to get us ready, and they're putting this out on purpose to allow us to see this. That's the blending of, because I've seen different measurements of 3i atlas, and now it's starting to jet itself on. It's hard for us to conceive in space when something's moving from like north, south, east, west, because it doesn't make sense. You're looking at different axes in space when you're like x, y, z axis, when you're trying to make something in propulsion move. But they're showing that there's jets coming out in a certain pattern that are taking the object itself and creating movement in it so it stays on its trajectory. There's nothing normal or flat about this. We're just floating through space because of gravity, and it got flung out from somewhere, and it's just kind of just oozing that way because it's just gravity's taken over. No, this is a definitely propulsion system to keep it on a very specific course.
Right.
So I'm just wondering why the release of the propulsion system off of 3i atlas comes, and everybody's pointing you to this thing down here. Yeah, but so Atlas comes very close to Mars. Again, they had it going directly over Mars in the initial projections of its course. But as you can see, it's either sped up or something is different now where it's off by, a couple arc minutes off of Mars now where it was not before. So the trajectory of it has changed even, because before it was supposed to be a perfect aligned, I mean, directly over Mars, and they were worried about some like energetic interaction between it. I'm not talking about, lightning bolts from planets, planetary lightning or something, but some energetic change or interaction because it's completely opposite polarization from somewhere else. because coming in from out. And you talked about that in the last show too. Completely opposite polarization. So what would you expect when it comes to a different polarity? It's going to activate somehow.
Well, it's just, anybody that plays with magnets knows if you got an attraction, you got an attraction. It's a strong force that pulls it together. Like I play with these super magnets, these big chunks that'll smash your hand if you don't watch out.
Yeah, be
Um,
careful.
and if you flip it and you put the polar opposite on there, it is a strong, equal force as the attraction. It pushes things away. I mean, and you can imagine all these objects in our solar system, each with
Oh,
their own
Antarctica.
charge and what they're made out of and all that.
Yeah, right. When you get to the purity of it as well. So if you're talking about something closer into the galactic core where magnetic properties are going to be very different, and we're out here at the very, we're very far out off of that on the wispy edges. You got to think about cloud densities too. Like if you're going to form a cloud, think about the very wispiest kind of clouds you would see in our skies compared to like dense hail. I mean, that's literally the difference between being that close in to the magnetic galactic center for the Mayans termed it as the Hunab Ku. So there was something very significant that they understood, that was the center of whatever it was, the magnetism, and just the way that interacting field generated life out here, and they could map it, how it ebbed and flowed.
Right, and it seems like in the news, I mean, we might be going there with leaking uh, anti-gravitic stuff. I mean, this is all over the internet right now too. China
Yeah, I saw
intercepting
that. That was a
meteor.
great video, by the way.
Yeah, and there's some really cool videos that go along with it. The thing is moving around up and down. It's not quite what you would expect with a meteor. um, Actually, here's a video of it right here, or
Yeah, and
at
there's
least
been about 15 or 20 fireballs coming in the last few days across so many different countries. And I encourage you to look through the news and check them out from Argentina, Brazil, Spain, Portugal, over Italy. And these are not the same ones that are cited. I mean, they're different ones that are coming in and different trajectories over these different countries.
let's play this here. They're saying they launched airplanes after this thing.
Well, supposedly they shot it out of
Or
the sky
jets.
with some sort of, missile defense system before it impacted. So you really have to wonder, how big was that thing that would have impacted, and what impact event would have happened had it hit the ground?
Oh, well, you could put so many topics on that. Like, what was it made of? Was it technology? I mean,
Yeah.
that would be a big deal, even if it wasn't technological. If they knew it was a specific, like, kind of alloy meteorite that would have landed, that could have revolutionized stuff. If some guy, like, I don't know, a regular metal worker came across it and found it first, that would change the balance of power significantly if it leaked out and got published somewhere, this new formula for an alloy. Uh, in all the ancient, Chinese, Japanese, Korean mythology, you basically tie this super cool steel that they use that revolutionized things with meteorites and some kind of entity even being along with that to give it to them. Hey, look, this meteorite, if you make a sword out of this, it's going to chop through everybody else's sword.
And then, put in alchemized mercury in the mix there too. And because if you energize mercury and you put an electric charge into it, it will start to spin. So if you're looking at, something really simple like gravitational vortex power and different vortices from Schauberger principles, if they understood the most basic principle of harvesting that 6 millivolt charge that's around us and how you do electroculture and get that copper to remagnetize the soils, if they were able to just get that basic understanding and amplify that with hundreds of those copper wires coming into a central point, that would amplify the electrical potential of that enough for something to start spinning, where if you touched it, you would really get shocked.
Right.
If you're sitting around it, that's okay because it's dispersed around us. But if you take hundreds or thousands of pieces of copper wires and put them into a central, and they're touching, and somehow they were able to, use lead. I mean, lead's an easy one to understand back then. Or even if they had gold, they could melt it, which is a high conductivity. Or they understood silver because you had these talons of gold and silver across the emperors. I mean, they all had just like bastions of gold and silver, so they understood the electrical properties of that. So if they could have melted that to something, even a solid gold like cylinder, that they could have welded gold coming off the copper into that, or even had gold itself wires going up by the thousands into the atmosphere, they could have charged that vessel. And by having that, and if they understood the properties of mercury that would turn in and spin itself, okay, well, you can't generate electricity from that in an innate form, but if you had something that would spin and create, like we understand generation of power, that's why we have superheated steam. It spins. There's a rod behind it. That spindle spins something else that then generates on. So imagine if you had the basic principle of understanding that mercury would spin indefinitely with just like gold wires in the air, and you could get it to spin, then that's a lot of possibility of all these things we ever knew. We are thousands and thousands of years behind history, and it's been lied to us and hidden from us about this linear generation of technology from A to B. We're winding the clock way, way back here.
Yeah, and that's actually what I wanted to bring up with these next couple of articles here, is that the mainstream is getting destroyed. And when I mean mainstream, I mean news outlets, I mean archaeological you know, paradigms that they've had forever. They're all falling apart. I don't know if you've seen they're digging under Sacsayhuaman in Peru. They're going to, maybe come out, and this may start a new decades of arguments, but they've dug under the block, under those megalithic stones. They're trying to date the soil from underneath it, and they've discovered all kinds of tunnels and all kinds of stuff that goes under that. So those are much bigger complexes. There's giant areas of Peru that we're finding new pyramids with elongated skulls. And, speaking of that, everything is about to be turned on its head. Here's an example of
Well, how deep are those
civilization
walls down?
15,000 years ago, right
How
here.
deep do those walls go down? Because the Texas wall as well goes down, 70, 80 feet, and they had to stop excavation. But how deep do the walls go down there at Sacsayhuaman?
Well, let's look here. See, here's a giant tunnel. They're going under it.
Okay.
This
Yeah,
is
you
a
can go way
weird
deep.
old world on Twitter, and they are doing an archaeological dig at this moment right now, digging up. So look at some of these pictures, initial pictures of the wall here. They're digging down. See, the wall keeps going right there. At least another. That guy probably is about 5 to 6 feet. So let's say that's at least 4 feet right there. And then they're finding soil layers down here, but they're also finding more construction, and they're taking samples. So we're about to get some answers. Like, unlike Gobekli Tepe in Turkey, this one's actually getting dug out. And you see that little in the corner there, they have a hole dug out. They have drilled sideways to get a good sample of the soil from underneath. So they're going to do radiocarbon dating on the soil, but then they're going to do other kind of dating too. And this complex goes underground. So this is just the top layer that's visible to the top. So now we know, just from their little bit of excavation that's finally happened, that there is tunnels underneath too. So they're going down there and looking around. So things are about to change. Like, here's a
But why? See, that all fits into the alien tech that's inbound for us. Perhaps that has something to do. Like, oh yeah, we were the one who did that. By the way, that thing goes way deeper, and like all these things adding up with the arrival of the comet and all these new things that were never, 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 ever allowed before to be talked about, discussed, or shown are suddenly now front page news. So you tell me the flip, like what is going on here?
well, the whole story of mankind's about to change, and just in time for the Great Reset. I mean, if
And
you
the great
reset
arrival.
everything, then you get rid of all this stuff, and then it's all, hearsay. There's not much of it, and most of this new discoveries is being documented digitally. Not much is being written down in the form of paperwork, books, printed pictures, things like that. So we're in a whole nother world. But this is an article that points out the new world's oldest mummies, 15,000 years in China, right here. They were smoke dried over a fire. And this is, they've linked the DNA to the people that now live in, like, Australia, New Guinea, some of the Pacific Islands. And we know today that they're one of the kind of bigger mixes of Neanderthal, Denisovan, and Cro-Mag for a better word. Verified because people today living, we know that there were different types of humans that were around for at least 450, 500,000 years. I don't know why they only document two of them going back that far, but it makes sense to me that if there were other hominids, they would have been that far back in time as well, living on the planet somewhere. And I think whenever the oceans, finally rose up another 400 feet, that was the last of the little areas that people that were segregated could live, and they had to all come and jump on here. But just think about this: these are people 15,000 years ago in the middle of China, mummifying their dead. Just you know, and the previous oldest ones were the Paracas people, which that was kind of what I was going to get to with this. These are 7,000-year-old people, and there's just these endless pyramids and stuff. None of them are documented. There's people laying around the surface. These guys are doing some cool work, and they're not. Look at all of that building. I mean, here, let me get that bigger. These are
And the
all
more rainfall there is coming down on these arid areas. So you have to think about the way the drying patterns were. If we go from the Indus Valley, which was a cradle of civilization, we go out to Mesopotamia, that area in Iraq and Iran and all these areas that are incredibly bone dry right now. Those were verdant. I mean, when I say that, milk and honey forests 6,000 to 7,000 years ago have dried completely out. Right, but there were cities, vast. I mean, this cradles of civilization. Like we started humanity from these areas for all the arts, sciences, engineering, and everything that has brought us to this point, minus a few setbacks here and there on resets. But the amount of buried, undiscovered relics and cities is probably 100 times more than we have excavated or found right now. So then swing right over to what you're talking about, the desert areas. Like all of these areas are experiencing like record rainfalls, record snowpack, and you would just expect that surface layer would start to erode off of that, and then suddenly you would see shapes. Because imagine, the soil deposition layers are coming in, it's just sand, or it's just some sort of debris that comes in and layers on top. Well, you're talking about millimeters per year. So then rewind the clock in massive floods, and what would have once taken, 100 years to deposit, a half an inch of soil on top, suddenly a record flood, once in a 1,000-year flood, wipes away 3 or 4 times that amount. And then suddenly the rain that's wiping away what was built off of soils, there's an enormous amount of what we're seeing, those same structural layers or those outlines of buildings and, what you consider streets. And it was so interesting is when you look at that, it's very much the way the British had laid out cities. It wasn't just some
right.
hodgepodge of a circle here, rectangle there, and it's like, hey, I'll build here, I'll build there. Those were very centralized cities, planned cities. So you got to think about that. We were told that planning, when did Ransom, like when did planning for cities and what we consider centralized cities, grids and things come in for engineering years ago?
8,000 years.
No, but in terms of what we can term like the British came in and did this, and the the
Well, they
Portuguese.
all did it. They all did it on the same mathematics and royal foots and everything as they did all the way back into Sumeria. And what you're looking at behind me is 7,000-year-old cities just
Mhm.
totally gone, that disappeared, and you can see they did the same grid patterns. They might have
Same.
been a little more, it looks like eco-friendly, I guess you would call it, where they built along the contours of the earth, because it seems these Paracas people and their ancestors knew how to farm very good in on the dry areas, and they were there to see it become dry. So what's
But maybe it
happening?
wasn't as dry as you think when they originally constructed those areas, but it did dry out subsequently as they march forward in
Well,
time.
that's what I'm saying. They were there to see it dry out, and we know that because when the Nazca people moved in, it was arid and there were no more lakes or anything. However, there's archaeological sites that show duck decoys and duck calling devices and things like that. So they had all of that sophisticated stuff back here in these cities in South America 7,000 plus years ago. And, we're looking at now they're opening this little path that shows you that there were a whole different set of peoples before the last deluge. I mean, like groups of people you wouldn't recognize today. And one of those groups were these elongated head people. We've now found sites that go back to 12,400 years, which is right around probably the big flood, all the way up until recently in Russia, Croatia, right in the Ukraine, about 3 or 4 thousand years ago. And then now it looks like evidence they were moving into South America thousands of years ago too, and then finally went extinct there. And they knew some of the people that we know today, like the Inca and the Nazca and things like that. But what's really weird about them, specifically the Paracas, is that they were farmers. They dug these ditches, they irrigated, and they learned how to farm on this dry land. When the Nazca came in and killed them, basically, we find these mass graves everywhere. They didn't have the same luck farming, so they started using these guys' skulls for divination, trying to pray for rains to come and farming to be able, and it just didn't happen because they had lost technologies right there. And now we're getting this story of we're finding these, like that other article, 115 these mummies that are all over the place. They go back 15,000 years. So they keep pushing and pushing the time of organized cities and things like that back further and further. And they're having to push, the occupation of the earth by humans of different kinds back further and further. So I think the new number is more like 1,000,000 years, when they really started pushing this idea of when we cross the threshold of being cavemen into civilized people was only 10,000 years at max. And really they started telling us it was 5,000 years ago, and then they pushed it to 10, and now we find in these 12,000-year-old sites that prove that they were obviously well on their way, or even on the backside of civilization.
Yeah, so it's 50, think about 500,000 years, that's 50 times longer. So that makes sense that, but the main question is, why would they lie about it? Is it a control mechanism through religion that gets you to believe that Earth is only this old, that this cataclysm has only occurred one time and the next one's going to be the rapture? I mean, they're pitting us against each other by, oh, that group of pitchfork holders is, oh, they're going to be over to you, you torch holders over there. Those pitchfork holders are trying to take your stuff away, flame holders over there. Like this whole thing of pitting everybody against each other. It doesn't matter if it's socioeconomic or if it's religious or if it's political belief, whatever it is, it's been running the same thing, because somewhere at the top, the same people have been in control for a vastly eon epic amount of period of time, and they want to retain the control. So what is about lying about history that's so important to dissuade us from looking back or getting us to question how old things really are? Because if you do take it back and look into some of the older, let's say we're in iteration 2.0, but if you go back to the previous times, 30,000 years ago, when there was supposedly an advanced civilization around, that means that we came through the melting of the ice off the ice age, which was a natural thing that occurs, which would have absolutely destroyed society anyway with that type of sea level rise. And you're coming off a stable climate for 30,000 years into a completely discombobulated climate like we're seeing today. I firmly believe we're heading back into an ice age slowly, but the changes we're seeing, the geomagnetic shifts that we're seeing, magnetic anomalies on Earth's magnetic field declining, and then all this cosmic ray bombarding, there's a huge amount of things happening. I believe we're descending into cool. Now we're going to hit into an ice age like tomorrow. No, but the step off into the cooling where it steps off indefinitely into the next ice age, we're in at that point. So that I'm always looking at the inverse. They've told us that we're heading into epoch heating of ice. Everything's going to melt and we're going to burn up on the planet, global boiling. I'm saying everything they tell you, it's the opposite. So we're heading into a cool period. So how many times through history would you try to get the masses to pit themselves against each other to try to retain control over these very specific periods in time when things flip? Because half a million years of history of humans being here. But it's interesting at that 400,000 year mark of the demarcation of a lot of stories of the Anunnaki coming down and gene engineering humans into like a gold mining race to work for them instead of themselves working. but then now it's going back a million years. Well, that just kind of got blown into the dust then. So is it really the Anunnaki stories that are true, or is it this new timeline of a million years we're hearing that's true? I mean, and again, I would ask you the question, why now with all of this new information and the confusion of history as this strange comet arrives here right around Christmas to the Earth?